All right. Hello, everyone. I'm Lakshmi Hiranandani, and I'm excited to be your host for the next 4 fabulous hours of content and discussion. Part of the ecosystem engagements team at GAME, the Global Alliance for Mass Entrepreneurship, and it is our pleasure to be co-hosting the entrepreneurship part of the skill development and entrepreneurship track with the Asra Foundation, the Nudge Foundation, and NSDC. For those of you who are afraid of getting yet another case of webinaritis, I'm pretty sure that today's speaker lineup and the agenda will keep you engaged and prevent that from happening. Entrepreneurship is without a doubt one of the most reliable levers for development, with MSMEs forming the backbone of the Indian economy. Economic studies from across the globe consistently link entrepreneurship, particularly the fast growth variety, with rapid job creation, GDP growth, and long-term increases in productivity. Additionally, entrepreneurship holds the key to almost half of the UN SDGs and yet does not figure in the top 6 causes that development and philanthropic support. In a post-COVID world, while these very same small businesses face the risk of mass extinction, they also hold the beacon of hope to India emerging as an economic power. Through the 12 sessions over today and tomorrow, various speakers and panels will explore the need for mass enterprises in the current context. Before I introduce you to our esteemed keynote speaker, a few quick housekeeping rules for the audience. Today we want to keep the audience high on engagement and energy, but just given the format of this conference, I would request the audience to please put in their comments and their questions in the Q&A section that you see at the bottom of your screen or in the chat section. And I would also encourage you to check out our amazing panel of speakers for this track in the People section of the Attendify app. Over there, we have featured the images and the bios of all of our speakers. And with that, it is my pleasure to invite Mr. Arun Maira, a former member of the Planning Commission of India and chairman at HelpAge International, who will be delivering the keynote address and who will be opening up the entrepreneurship part of this track. Mr. Maira, thank you again for taking out the time to join us at Charcha 2020, the world's largest online convening. Over to you, Mr. Maira.
Thank you very much, Lakshmi. So thank you again very much, Lakshmi. And I think Madan may be somewhere in the background. And thank you, Madan, for inviting me and giving me the privilege of kicking off, starting probably the most important track in the whole Zoom conference. And you would say, my goodness, I'm sort of giving too much importance to what we are going to be discussing. But yes, as Lakshmi said, it is the backbone. It is supposed to be, and I'm going to use the word supposed to be, the reliable backbone. Entrepreneurship, mass entrepreneurship should be the reliable backbone of creating a better world for everyone. I'm going to begin with the sad story of Hari Krishna, which I read on the front page of the Indian Express a few days ago. Hari Krishna, a migrant worker from Bihar in Dwarka in Delhi, was working with a contractor, a construction contractor. And when the lockdown came, construction business stopped. Hari Krishna wasn't being paid. The contractor disappeared, phone switched off. And Hari Krishna, living with his old father, his wife and 2 children, couldn't survive. So Hari Krishna decided to take very seriously a slogan that we have been propagating in the country for the last 4 or 5 years, that don't be a job seeker, be a job creator. So Hari Krishna stepped out and said he's going to create a job for himself because the world of job seekers had collapsed. It was a very harsh, unreliable world, and it had collapsed. And he was going to be stepping up and being an entrepreneur, creating incomes for himself. So he found money. We don't know the details of that story. He borrowed the money, and bought a cart for vegetables on some working capital basis. He was buying vegetables in the mandi and selling them in the locality. When the police came in and charged him with violating the social distancing rules and seized his cart and took it away. So that was the end of the income coming in as well as the end of his finances. And Hari Krishna found that neither could he be a job seeker with any benefit to his family, nor a job creator to provide for his family, and he committed suicide. Now, that's the harsh reality of, we are finding it's probably the harsh reality for 3, 4, 500 million people in our country. So this concept of entrepreneurship, um, what is it? And what do we need to do to enable more people who want to be entrepreneurs because they have no choice? So I used to say to Madan and to Ravi Venkatesan earlier that, going around and telling people in schools, be an entrepreneur, is not necessary. The circumstances around people just compel them to be entrepreneurs. But with that, are they able to sustain their incomes and provide sufficiently for their families? Apparently not. I mean, the evidence is in front of us the last few weeks. So this concept of entrepreneurship. So the language used to be for entrepreneurs a few years ago. I would call it the Bangalore language of entrepreneurs. Stand up, become a wealth creator, and for whom the wealth was, be a unicorn. Let's measure how many unicorns have been produced in India in a few years as compared to elsewhere, as a test of the entrepreneurial climate of India. I want to contrast the concept of unicorns who produce a lot of wealth for themselves and for the few who support them, investors who support them, with fireflies. A firefly like Hari Krishna is a person who has a passion for the sake of need, not for the sake of greed, to be an entrepreneur. And with his light, or could be a woman with her light, she wants to produce goodness for himself or herself and the few people around, the family in this case. It go bigger than that, that I want to, with my entrepreneurial spirit, help many other people in my environment, in my community, in my mahalla, to live a better life, to have more opportunity and more dignity in their lives. So these are, to my mind, what I call fireflies. They have their own light and they're small. And we want millions of them to rise, which is the concept of mass entrepreneurship, which GAME, the Global Alliance of Mass Entrepreneurship, is promoting. What are the skills that a mass entrepreneur in this mass environment, a firefly, needs to have? They're quite different to the skills and the orientation of a unicorn. A mass entrepreneur, firstly, by our definition, that is mass entrepreneurship, is not going to be somebody who's going to be employing too many people. The mass entrepreneur is going to be living and existing along with other entrepreneurs, all of whom are small, and all of whom together, like a mass of fireflies, rise and create goodness and light amidst darkness, light and hope for millions around themselves. They're millions themselves, but for many more millions around them too. So the skills of the mass entrepreneur here are, firstly, the real entrepreneurial skills, which is making the most out of the least that the environment provides you. Not looking for large investments in your enterprise to make life easy, but just taking, like old Hari Krishna, whatever little you can get and making much more for your lives and for the lives of others out of it. So this orientation of learning how to make the most with the least that the environment gives you is the entrepreneurship orientation that we wish to have in those who will be part of this paradigm, which is a necessary paradigm of mass entrepreneurship. These entrepreneurs must learn the skills of collaborating and not too much the skills of competing. The whole language of business, the formal teaching of business, is teaching people how to be competitive, how to be competitive in your industry. And we go on to say how to be globally competitive, which is stand up, show that you're better than the others, in fact, compete and smother the others, and thus stand out as a unicorn, as the biggest amongst many. That's not the orientation we want here. We, yes, want people who are competing against adversity, but not competing against others. They're collaborating with others and together, all together, are overcoming an adversity that their surroundings environment has created for people like themselves. People like, I'm again using Hari Krishna, who may be the extreme example of the situation in which people are, for whom we have to develop new paradigms and new policies. Remember what Mahatma Gandhi said, that when you're thinking about, as a big change maker, as a policy maker, about what would be the changes that you want to bring about or what the policy should bring about, think of the least advantaged person that can come to your mind and see how your paradigm, your policy is going to make life a more dignified life, a more easy life for such a person. So, creating a paradigm, creating policies, creating an environment that is good for people like Hari Krishna is what our ambition must be. So, in this environment, what are the skills that entrepreneurs need to have? An environment in which they must be understanding the forces in the system around them, finding the possibilities in those harsh forces which give them opportunities, finding in the system around them the opportunities to partner with others and to together make a difference. Systems thinking, thinking of a system in which there are many things interacting together, through which and through a lens of looking at the environment as a system, finding, as I said, the little bits that you can take advantage of and avoiding very cleverly the parts that will trip you in the system. Systems thinking, learning that there are many others in the system and that together in the system we can make a difference for each of us and for everybody. So systems thinking is an orientation that has become essential. It's quite different to domain knowledge, where you understand more and more about the part of the system in which you are operating, become an expert in that part of the system. Surely every entrepreneur, including Hari Krishna, would need to understand how vegetables are arriving at the mandi from which he buys, so he can anticipate when to get the best ones and also understand cost and prices. Yes, he needs to be a domain expert in retailing and in the vegetable business. But that won't be sufficient, as I pointed out, because everything else is not provided to this person. He has to be able to map the whole system. And thus also entrepreneurs in their own domains can become unicorns by being masters of their own domains, but they will not be the sort of entrepreneurs that will create mass entrepreneurship, producing light and goodness for many, many people. So systems thinking, and the next skill, as I pointed out already, is not the skill to compete, but the skill to form collaboratives. And in those collaboratives, of course, everybody's struggling hard. So there is a need for everyone to ensure that they are being fairly treated. So the matter is not in competing and winning over someone else, but in assuring that the other person is being fairly treated while you are looking after yourself and getting more for yourself also. So the skills of listening to others and their needs and being kind to others, being fair in the transactions between yourself and others, and people being fair to each other is how we will create collaboratives in which many fireflies can rise together. Our aim has to be to create a more compassionate society, a society with more harmony in it, and not this dog eat dog society of who's made the most and the soonest and the fastest. The language of entrepreneurship, I go back to the financial world concepts of entrepreneurship, is the language of exits. How soon can you get somewhere and then exit out of the enterprise? Oh, no, we are talking of people who make life their enterprise, and their whole enterprise is about continuing to improve the life for themselves and their families and for many others around them. There's no exit, and there's no measurement of the time or uh, indicator of the time when you can exit from this enterprise. The only exit from such a harsh enterprise, unfortunately, is the one that Hari Krishna was compelled to take, just exiting life. There's no exit from this world of mass entrepreneurship and the world in which people like Hari Krishna and many more like them can live with dignity, with some sense of security, with a sense that the world is fair to them also. So here we are, game and mass entrepreneurship. What do we, Madan, myself, Ravi, and others who have founded this great movement, do to enable fireflies to rise and grow?
Great.
We do.
Thank you so much, Mr. Maira. Sorry to cut you off, but we're kind of running a bit behind time. But thank you so much. We are most grateful for that really thought-provoking keynote. I think you've given us and the audience a real lot to think about, especially on how we can value the fireflies and nurture the fireflies and not just the unicorns. So thank you so much, sir, for opening up the session. With that, we will move on to the next session of Charcha 2020, which is a panel on collaboratives for mass entrepreneurship. And we have our panelists, Madhuri from Game. We have Dr. Anand Deshpande, the founder of the Astra Foundation, founder and chairman of Persistent Systems, and we will have it moderated by Pari Natarajan, the CEO and co-founder of Zinno. So Pari, I'm handing it over to you.
Thanks, Lakshmi. That was truly an inspiring talk by Mr. Maira. And for us, we are going to talk about what is the role of collectives in creating mass entrepreneurship in India. And we have Dr. Anand Deshpande, founder, chairman of Persistent Systems and co-founder of the Astra Foundation, and as well as Madan Padaki, a co-founder of the Global Alliance for Mass Entrepreneurship. Both of them have deep expertise in building foundations and bringing government, ecosystem, NGOs, think tanks, foundations together to create mass entrepreneurship in India. Just to give you a context, what's the landscape look like? India has over 70 million small businesses. It's spread across manufacturing, services, and retail and wholesale. 15 million manufacturing firms, 30 million retail, and 30 million in services. And if you look at the overall landscape, 97% of these companies have less than 5 employees. And even within that, a large percentage, over 90% of the companies are anywhere between 1 to 2, 3 employees, really doing subsistence rather than actual true entrepreneurs in terms of building businesses. And if you look at the current impact of COVID, our estimate is over 50 million out of the 70 million has been impacted. And the overall industry contributes to over 30% of GDP. And if you imagine that 50 million of those firms have been impacted by the current COVID crisis, and that is going to have a massive impact on the overall employment in India. And these companies actually contribute over 50% of India's exports. And even our exports will have a major impact due to the current crisis because of SMEs. And it is very important for the collectives to stabilize and accelerate the growth of the small business and medium-sized business in India over the next several months and years. So in the panel, what we're going to do is talk a little bit about the motivation behind the Astra and Game, and each of them will give us perspective. Then we'll talk about what we believe are the roles of government and NGOs in driving the change over the next several months and years. And then talk about how the different entities can come together and collaborate to be able to create this movement of mass entrepreneurship in India. So those are the key talking points what we have. And I'll welcome Anand and Madan to the panel. I'll start with Madan. Maybe Madan, you can define what do you mean by mass entrepreneurship? And our studies show there are 70 million small businesses. And are these all, in your definition, entrepreneurs, or is the definition a subset of it?
Thanks, Buddy, for teeing this off for us, and delighted to be here. Thanks to the Nudge guys and the ASRA folks for pulling it all together. So, Buddy, to your question, if you were to ask a youth in Bangalore, who do you think is an entrepreneur? You will get questions, to that question, you'll get answers to say that, listen, it's tech, it is all those guys building those platforms or geeky tech products or whatever, right? That's one extreme of the entrepreneurial spectrum. If you were to ask our friends in the government or the Ministry of MSME, you're going to probably get a view that these are smaller businesses, solopreneurs, what we call as necessity entrepreneurs who need subsidies, who are seen largely as beneficiaries, right? And that's the other end of the spectrum. As you rightly pointed out, 94% or odd of our 111 people who work in the MSME or 70 million enterprises are in the 1 to 2 employees, right? At GAME, we started looking at how can these entrepreneurs start to be job creators. And the answer does not lie in any of these spectrums, but there's a missing middle where there are opportunity-driven entrepreneurs who can operate with a growth mindset, who say that, listen, if the environment is right, we can then start to scale and grow, and therefore we can employ 5 to 20 people. And that will give a huge fillip to the job creation and to the GDP growth of the country. So the mass entrepreneurship is defined as an entrepreneur who is opportunity driven, who can grow, and therefore in that growth enable anywhere from 5 to 20 jobs. And we also say it's mass because it has to happen in every nook and corner of the country. It is not just limited to the metro clusters or the tech corridors or whatever. Can we see this kind of an entrepreneur emerge from every village, every taluka of the country? And what can we as a collective, as a collaborative, do to enable that to happen?
Got it. And I think that's concept of the Firefly entrepreneurs and what Dr. Maira talked about. Okay, great. And Anand, from your perspective, I want to start with your motivation for starting the ASRA, and why did you start it, and why did you choose the problem of creating entrepreneurs? Why did you pick that? Why did you start, and why did you pick this specific problem?
Pari, first, thanks for inviting me here, and it's a real pleasure to be part of this narrative in this discussion. So, I started out mainly doing persistent for the last 30 years, and about 5-6 years back, I sort of had this thing that having reached a point of, sort of middle age in some sense, trying to think about what is a good problem to make a legacy option on. And we created a family foundation called the ASRA Foundation. So it's a family philanthropy foundation in some sense. And when you do that, the idea there is to try to find one big problem that will last many years, say 25 years. And clearly employment and jobs is really one big problem that I think India needs to address. And that sort of got us thinking about how do we create jobs. And when we started to look at jobs and job creation, it was very obvious that job creators is where we need to focus on. So what we found from where our sort of vantage, we are in Pune, which is a big urban area. So we found that urban entrepreneurs, there is a lot of growth opportunities there. There is no reason why every tailor in the city needs to feel so different from each other. So is it possible to help these small businesses with their processes and activities so that they can be super efficient and effective? And if we can get them to do that, what we found is that these small self-employed entrepreneurs is how I call them. They are very easily able to grow their businesses from 1 or 2 to 15 and 20. And that jump that you can get of getting this engine of growth to happen on job side, where every individual can become an entrepreneur, become a self-employed person. You're not dependent on jobs from someone else. And how do you get started and get going? And can we as a system of partners, ecosystem, NGOs work together to ensure that these small businesses don't fail, and how do we make them super successful so that they can deliver their growth on a case individual at a time basis. And that's really our motivation for the Asra, and that's the platform that we have created. And what I'm very excited about with the partnership that we have with Game and others is that there are many like-minded NGOs or non-profit social ventures all around, and we are trying to work together to see how to make sure that this 70 million small businesses are very effective, successful, and delivering to their promise and growing on an ongoing basis. This is the real growth engine for the world and for India as well.
And Anand, just to give can you give an example in terms of what has been the impact, some stories in terms of the companies the Astra Foundation has been able to help? Is it more in terms of starting a company, or to Madan's point, moving from 2 to 3 employees to get to about 10, 20 employees, or 10x growth in some level?
Yeah, so we have lots of stories. We have now about 70,000 plus businesses that we have supported in the last few years. And what we do through the platform is quite, helps them to get past the first level. I'm going to give you a few examples. So I have this lady that we are worked with called Meenal, who runs Sakhi Beauty Parlor in a small suburb of Pune called Loni Karbor. And in that area, there are lots of students who are, staying as paying guests or in shared apartments because there's colleges around there. Now, clearly this lady is providing a beauty salon and a beauty service. So her business grew significantly by starting to understand that her market group is students. They are on Facebook and social media. She should be on Instagram, on various other things, because that's where these students are hanging out. So we helped her create a simple program to help her push her beauty salon services on social media. And that really saw 3x to 5x improvement in her number of people who were coming to her. And now she's catering to younger students. So, the pricing and how do you kind of track them and how do you go back to them? When do you go? So timings, where do you meet them? So all of these things are very specific to these kinds of industries, depending on the different kinds of communities that they are operating in. So we have examples of this on helping them with marketing, with sales, finding locations, finding compliance, and all of these kinds of things. And one other point I want to point out, and this was something that Dr. Arun, Maira also mentioned, the Hare Krishnas don't necessarily come up with a plan. They're not spending 3 years or even 3 months in a curriculum class that they know everything what to do. These businesses just happen. And once they happen, they are very fragile in some sense because these guys don't know exactly what to do. They're at the mercy of a whole bunch of people, customers, money lenders, government, all of these guys. And trying to make sure that they can be robust and be sort of get past those simple holes that they're going to find really makes the success happen.
Interesting. So there's a lot of basic bottlenecks they face in the
simple things, lots of simple things that would be obvious for someone who were to sit back and think about them. But if I'm a small food counter that is running something like we ran with a restaurant, again, same kind of things, fine-tuning the menu, depending on the locality, helping out with putting the menu in a nicer format. Again, small things can give you 3 times improvement in your sales and outcomes. So, small interventions on an ongoing basis is what these businesses need. And what we have done at the Asra Foundation is to make a list of about 75 to 80 services or processes, which we find are things that these small businesses need on an ongoing basis. And we have templated them and they are available online. So people who get stuck, we have something for them to get out of the, meaning get unstuck in some sense.
Very interesting. It's almost just in time to support them as they face these bottlenecks. Madan, from your perspective, what has been the motivation of starting a game? And you had several initiatives you spearhead, but why game? And what has been the impact so far?
Sure. So when Ravi, Makin, and I started discussing this 2 years ago, interestingly, all of us had worked together in one form or the other. We were a part of social venture partners in Bangalore and at the India level as well. We had conceived something called as a million jobs mission. So this whole aspect of where are the job creation engines for the country was playing heavily on our minds. Interestingly, both of them are also angel investors in the social enterprise that I run called OneBridge, which is all about creating entrepreneurs in the villages. So one question that was always playing on my mind was that, listen, in the social enterprise that I run, what is the biggest impact that we can do? Maybe we can reach 100,000 entrepreneurs in the next 3-4 years. But the need of the hour in the country is like 150 million. That is the number of youth who will enter the workforce in the next 10 years. They'll all be looking for jobs in the traditional sense that we speak today. And where are the jobs for them? So when we were discussing on this issue, that's when we realized that, listen, maybe there are 1,000 models out there. Maybe there are 1,000 variants of these models that need to come up. But there's no single place for anybody wanting to create an entrepreneurial movement or a model to go to. So that's how GAME was conceived, saying, can we be the go-to for all organizations and all ecosystem actors, right? From governments to the fantastic work that Deasra is doing, to a lot of work that individual NGOs are doing on the ground, to academic institutions, to corporates. Can we create a platform, so to speak, where everybody can come, learn together, can do experiments, pilots together, can accelerate the learning process, can we, and then collaborate with each other. You know, as Anand was speaking, if you can then add dimensions to the impact that Deasra is doing. What if all of the 70,000 people were to be given an access to a wide mentoring network? What if they were given access to not just create employment for themselves? What if they were able to create internships for youth in their communities, right? What if they were able to access government schemes at the tap of a button? So then if you start surrounding other solutions and other solution providers around solutions that are working, then the impact is multiplied significantly, right? So that thought process led us to the dream about 1.5 years ago, where it took shape, that let's create an alliance. So the most important word in the Global Alliance for Mass Entrepreneurship is the alliance, that we need to operate as an alliance. GAME in our minds clearly is not an organization, but is a network, is a network of all of us who can come together, learn fast, fail forward, right? And figure out how can we solve this humongous problem that we see today of creating jobs and creating equal opportunities for everyone.
And Madan, one is just the alliances, you could form all of this, right? But how does it make an impact at an individual entrepreneur level? How do you measure it? And do you have examples of how GAME is impacting specific entrepreneurs? And you mentioned about growing 10x. That's great,
Right.
growth. That's what VCs look for. And you're looking for that in SMBs, small companies. So how does it work?
So we look at impact at two levels. One is, of course, in our mission statement, we've said GAME has to catalyze an entrepreneurial ecosystem that can create 10 million new mass entrepreneurs, creating 50 million jobs. Half of them should be women. That's what we've said. But we clearly know that it has to happen at the next level, where we are able to bring in hundreds of ecosystem actors together, right? And we are able to contribute towards the mission. So when we do not work directly with the entrepreneurs as GAME as an organization, as a secretariat, we work with entities that work with entrepreneurs.
Okay.
Right? Now, there are several things that we're doing both directly and at the organization, at the secretariat, at the alliance level. Take, for instance, in Bangalore, as an example, we have actually taken on a women entrepreneurial task force. So the task force has about 10, 15 odd ecosystem actors, right, from government to committed individuals who want to see entrepreneurship happen, to corporates who are supporting this whole journey. And we ran a program called Futurepreneurs to identify stories. So one of the things as a pillar, so if I were to just step back, at GAME, we believe that to create an entrepreneurial ecosystem, 5 things have to happen over a period of time. One, you need to make mass entrepreneurship aspirational. Today, if you go out of the metro and ask any kid, what do you want to be? 9 out of 10 chances you'll hear, I want to become I want a government job. I want to become a policeman or an inspector, whatever that is, right? So the narrative is still very government job-led because that gives security, right? in 10 years, can we change that to say, I want to become a mass entrepreneur? Can we make mass entrepreneurship aspirational at a local level? Two, how do we embed entrepreneurship into the curriculum of schools itself? One of our partners, Make It runs Udyam, and Udyam has been instrumental in working with the government of Delhi to embed, to create an entrepreneurial mindsets curriculum, and 7,20,000 kids across government schools in Delhi are undergoing this curriculum on a daily basis, right? How do we make that happen with every kid in the country? Third, how do we make sure that a kid coming out of a college is able to get onto a path of being a job creator than a job seeker? What virtual incubation facilities can we create in every district, every taluk to make that journey?
So how do you address it early in the grassroots itself before they actually become entrepreneurs? Okay.
Exactly.
Jumping
And that's
on
where
to
you need to work at a deeper level.
Got it. Just going on to Anand. So Anand, you've been having this journey over the last few years, and we talked about collectives and how all of the different parts of the ecosystem has come together. But even today, I mean, so what are some of your frustrations? For example, government just continues to focus on how do we create another TCS, another 500,000 employee companies in the country, and what has been your frustrations and challenges as you go through this with the overall ecosystem, be it government and other NGOs and others?
I think you know these, you know these quite well, Pari, and maybe you should also comment a bit on this topic. But you see, the thing is, lots of these small businesses don't know what they are doing, and the government actually misses out on this group. The very small, self-help group or the Mudra loans or whatever, below 50,000 kind of stuff, there's grants that the government has. And the government likes to look at the very large ones. Everyone talks about the very big businesses. And this was mentioned in the unicorn context. So the ones that we are looking at are not absolutely the people who are uneducated or any of those kinds of things. These people are educated. They do make a decent living. These are decent businesses that can be growing, and they just don't want to be really large. So they are 2 to 5 people businesses. They make good amount of money. So take photographers. So take weddings and photography. The amount of money people spend in weddings and photography is significant. People who are doing this